You've chosen to spend 2 hours exploring Homer Simpson lore to sleep to, and you made the perfect choice for drifting into peaceful rest tonight. As you settle in and let the day fade away, we're going to journey through a surprisingly deep and meaningful life of Homer J. Simpson, a man whose simple desires and complex heart have made him one of the most beloved characters in television history. This is a complete story of Springfield's most famous resident, told gently to guide you toward sleep. Homer J. Simpson was born on May 12, 1956, in Springfield, though which states Springfield remains one of life's pleasant mysteries. His early years were shaped by two very different parents who would influence the man he would become in profound ways. His father, Abraham Simpson, was a World War II veteran with endless stories and a gruff demeanor that masked deep love for his son. His mother, Mona Simpson, was a free spirit whose idealism would eventually lead her away from her family, but never stop her from loving them. The Simpson family lived on a farm during Homer's earliest years, a modest place where young Homer learned about hard work from his father and gentle kindness from his mother. The farm wasn't successful, but provided the backdrop for Homer's first understanding of what family meant. He would help his father with chores, though even as a child, Homer showed more enthusiasm than skill. His mother would read to him at night, fostering an imagination that would serve him well in his many future adventures. When Homer was still young, the family moved to their house on Evergreen Terrace, the same street where Homer would later raise his own family. The transition from farm to suburb was difficult for Abraham, who struggled to adapt to modern life after his military service. He worked various jobs, never quite finding his place in peacetime America. This instability would affect young Homer, who learned early that life could be unpredictable. Mona Simpson was the warm center of Homer's childhood universe. She would make him special sandwiches, cutting off the crust just the way he liked. She taught him to tie his shoes with patience when Abraham would have given up in frustration. She sang him lullabies that he would later hum to his own children, though he could never quite remember all the words. Her presence made their small house feel like the safest place in the world. The defining trauma of Homer's childhood came when Mona had to leave. She had become involved with a group of activists protesting Mr. Burns' biological warfare laboratory. During a protest that went wrong, she accidentally destroyed the lab's dangerous experiments, becoming a fugitive from the law. One night, she tucked Homer into bed, told him she loved him, and disappeared. Homer was told she had died, a lie that would shape his relationship with loss and abandonment for decades to come. After Mona left, Abraham struggled to raise Homer alone. He was not naturally nurturing, having been raised in an era when men weren't expected to be emotional caregivers. He did his best, but his best often meant parking young Homer in front of television while he figured out dinner or leaving with neighbors when work demanded. The television became Homer's companion, teacher, and window to a world beyond Springfield. School was never Homer's strong suit. He struggled with reading. Finding the letters would swim around the page. Math was a mystery that seemed to have no connection to real life. Science class explosions were common enough that his desk was moved to the back corner, near the window for quick ventilation. But Homer had other talents that school couldn't measure. He could make anyone laugh, had a memory for jingles and commercial slogans that was nearly photographic, and showed surprising creativity when motivated. Young Homer's best friend was Barney Gumble, a bright kid with real potential. Barney was everything Homer wasn't. Academically gifted, ambitious, focused on the future. Their friendship was built on genuine affection and shared adventures rather than common interests. Barney helped Homer with homework, while Homer helped Barney learn to relax and have fun. They would spend hours at the quarry, throwing rocks and dreaming about their futures. The quarry was Springfield's unofficial playground for kids brave enough to ignore the no trespassing signs. Homer and Barney would compete to see who could throw rocks the farthest, who could find the most interesting abandoned objects, who could tell the scariest story. These simple competitions built a friendship that would endure despite the very different paths their lives would take. High school brought new challenges and opportunities for Homer. He discovered he had a talent for sports, particularly football, where his natural bulk and surprising agility made him a valuable player. He wasn't a star quarterback, but he was reliable on the defensive line, earning the nickname Homer the Hammer for his enthusiastic, if not always legal tackles. Sports gave him a sense of belonging he hadn't found in academics. It was in high school that Homer first noticed Marge Bouvier. She was everything he wasn't. Elegant, intelligent, artistic, and responsible. Her tall blue hair made her impossible to miss in the hallways, but it was her quiet confidence that truly captured Homer's attention. She moved through the chaos of high school with grace, seemingly untouched by the petty dramas that consumed everyone else. Homer's first attempts to talk to Marge were disasters. He would freeze up, say something inappropriate, or literally trip over his own feet. She was kind about his awkwardness, but clearly not interested in the loud, crude boy who seemed to embody everything she was trying to rise above. Homer understood he wasn't her league, but couldn't stop himself from trying. The detention room became an unlikely Cupid for Homer and Marge. Homer was there for yet another prank gone wrong, while Marge had been unfairly punished for something her sisters had done. Forced to sit together in silence, they began passing notes. Without the pressure of face-to-face conversation, Homer could be thoughtful and funny rather than overwhelming. Marge discovered a sweetness beneath his rough exterior. Their first real conversation happened after detention, walking to their cars in the empty school parking lot. Homer offered to carry Marge's books. She accepted, and they talked about everything and nothing. He made her laugh with impressions of their teachers. She shared her dreams of becoming an artist. The sun set behind the Springfield hills, and neither wanted the conversation to end. Their first date was at the movies, watching Space Mutants, a terrible science fiction film that Homer loved and Marge endured. But halfway through, when Homer noticed Marge wasn't enjoying it, he suggested they leave and get ice cream instead. This small act of consideration, putting her happiness above his own entertainment, showed Marge there was more to Homer than met the eye. The ice cream parlor was closed when they arrived, but Homer convinced the owner, who was just locking up, to serve them anyway. He told an elaborate lie about it being Marge's birthday, and this being the only thing that could save it. The owner, charmed or possibly just exhausted, served them 2 sundaes. Marge knew Homer was lying, but appreciated the effort he put into making her happy. Their relationship grew slowly. Marge helped Homer with his homework, not doing it for him, but teaching him strategies to manage his learning difficulties. Homer introduced Marge to the simple pleasures she had been too serious to enjoy. Carnival games, terrible movies, junk food eaten without guilt. They balanced each other in ways neither had expected. Abraham didn't approve of Marge initially, seeing her as too good for his son and therefore likely to hurt him. He would make snide comments about her hair, her family, her ambitions. But Marge won him over with patience and genuine interest in his war stories. She was one of the few people who would listen to his entire collection of tales without interrupting or leaving. Homer's senior year was marked by anxiety about the future. College wasn't realistic given his grades and his family's finances. The military seemed like Abraham's preferred option, but Homer had no interest in following his father's path. He felt the pressure of approaching adulthood without any clear direction, a feeling that would become familiar throughout his life. It was Barney who inadvertently solved Homer's immediate future. On the night before their SATs, Barney was nervous about the test that would determine his college prospects. Homer, trying to be a good friend, introduced him to beer, thinking it would calm his nerves. Instead, it awakened dependency that would derail Barney's promising future, while ironically clearing Homer's path. With Barney no longer competing for the same opportunities, Homer found doors opening that might have otherwise been closed. He got a job at the Springfield nuclear power plant, not in any skilled position, but as a low-level employee with potential for advancement through seniority rather than merit. It wasn't glamorous, but it was stable employment with benefits, more than many of his classmates could claim. The early days at the power plant were overwhelming for Homer. The technology was beyond his comprehension. The safety protocols were extensive and boring, and his supervisor was demanding and humorless. But Homer discovered he had a talent for being in the right place at the right time, for avoiding blame when things went wrong, and for making friends with the right people. His relationship with Marge continued despite her going to college and his working full-time. She studied art and literature while he learned the bare minimum about nuclear safety. Their worlds were diverging, but their connection remained strong. Homer would drive to her college on weekends, bringing snacks and gossip from Springfield. Marge would help him understand his work materials, translating technical jargon into concepts he could grasp. The proposal happened at the miniature golf course, not because Homer thought it was romantic, but because it was where they had spent many happy dates. He had planned to propose at a fancy restaurant, but his credit card was declined. Instead of giving up, he took her to the golf course, got down on one knee at the windmill hole, and offered her an onion ring instead of diamond ring, promising a real one when he could afford it. Marge said yes, not despite the humble proposal, but because of it. Their wedding was small, held in a tiny chapel across the state line. Homer had wanted to give Marge the elaborate wedding she deserved, but finances and an unexpected pregnancy made that impossible. Marge wore her mother's wedding dress, altered to hide her growing belly. Homer wore a rented tuxedo that was too tight and too short. The ceremony was performed by a minister who might have been drunk. It was perfect in its imperfection. Bart's arrival changed everything for Homer. He had thought he understood responsibility when he got married, but holding his son for the first time redefined the concept. This tiny person was completely dependent on him, a thought that was both terrifying and motivating. Homer promised baby Bart that he would be a better father than Abraham had been, though he wasn't entirely sure what that meant. The early years of parenthood were difficult. Money was tight, the baby was colicky, and both Homer and Marge were exhausted. Homer worked extra shifts at the plant, while Marge managed the household and the baby. They would pass each other like ships in the night, too tired for conversation beyond the essential. But they persevered, held together by love and stubbornness. Homer discovered that fatherhood brought out unexpected qualities in him. He could function on less sleep than he thought possible. He developed a sixth sense for when Bart was about to get into something dangerous. He learned to change diapers while half asleep, to warm bottles to the perfect temperature, to distinguish between different types of crying. These weren't skills he had ever imagined needing, but he mastered them through necessity. The power plant became more than just a job as Homer's family grew. It was security, health insurance, and the possibility of advancement. He studied for his supervisor's exam multiple times, failing repeatedly but never quite giving up. His co-workers, Lenny and Carl, became his closest friends, sharing the monotony of monitoring reactor temperatures and the excitement of Free Donut Friday. Mr. Burns, the plant's owner, was a figure of fear and fascination for Homer. The ancient billionaire seemed to embody everything wrong with capitalism, yet Homer couldn't help but admire his success. Their interactions were rare in those early years, with Homer being far too low on the corporate ladder to warrant Mr. Burns' attention. But Homer studied his boss from afar, learning about power dynamics and workplace politics. Lisa's birth brought new joy and new challenges. Where Bart had been a tornado of energy from day one, Lisa was contemplative and observant. She would stare at Homer with wise eyes that seemed to see through him. He loved her immediately and completely, but also felt intimidated by this infant, who already seemed smarter than him. Homer approached fathering Lisa differently than Bart. With Bart, he could be physical, playing rough and tumble games. With Lisa, he had to be gentler, more thoughtful. He would sing to her, badly but enthusiastically. He would read her books, stumbling over words but making up for it with silly voices. She would laugh at his efforts, and that laughter was worth any embarrassment. The financial pressure of supporting a family of 4 on one income led Homer to seek additional money through various schemes. He tried selling stolen sugar door to door, invested in pumpkin futures, and even attempted to become a pharmaceutical test subject. Each scheme failed in its own spectacular way, but Homer's optimism remained unshaken. The next idea would be the one that made them rich. He was sure of it. Marge's patience during these schemes was remarkable. She would express concern, point out obvious flaws, but ultimately support Homer's dreams even when she knew they would fail. She understood that these schemes weren't really about money, but about Homer's desire to be more than just a safety inspector, to prove he could provide for his family in extraordinary ways. The relationship with Ned Flanders began when the Flanders family moved next door. Ned's relentless positivity and success at everything he attempted triggered Homer's deepest insecurities. Here was a man the same age as Homer who had a better job, better behaved children, and seemingly perfect marriage. The fact that Ned was genuinely nice made it impossible to legitimately hate him, which somehow made Homer resent him more. But beneath the resentment was grudging respect and even affection. When Ned faced real troubles, Homer was there to help, though he would grumble about it. When Homer needed assistance, Ned provided it without question or expectation of repayment. Their relationship was complicated, a mixture of rivalry, friendship, and the peculiar bond that develops between neighbors who share a property line and life's ups and downs. Moe's Tavern became Homer's refuge from the pressures of work and family. It wasn't that he didn't love his family, but sometimes he needed a place where he wasn't a husband, father, or employee. At Moe's, he was just Homer, sharing beers and conversations with other men who understood the weight of adult responsibilities. The tavern was more than a bar. It was a community center for Springfield's working-class men. Problems were discussed over beers, solutions proposed and discarded, friendships maintained through regular proximity. Moe himself, despite his gruff exterior and questionable business practices, genuinely cared about his regulars, though he would never admit it openly. Homer's drinking was a constant source of tension with Marge. She worried about his health, their finances, and the example he was setting for the children. Homer would promise to cut back, and sometimes he would actually try. But the combination of stress, habit, and genuine enjoyment of the social aspects of drinking made permanent change difficult. Work at the power plant settled into a routine that Homer found comforting. He knew exactly which buttons to push, which alarms to ignore, and how long he could nap before someone would notice. His incompetence became a form of competence, as he developed an intuitive understanding of exactly how little he could do while still keeping his job. The safety inspector position came through a combination of luck, seniority, and the fact that no one else wanted it. The job required attending meetings, filing reports, and theoretically ensuring the plant operated safely. Homer approached these duties with creative interpretation, signing documents without reading them and attending meetings in body, if not in spirit. His desk in Sector 7G became his home away from home. He decorated it with family photos, though they were often covered by donuts or safety reports he should have been reading. He developed a system of mirrors that allowed him to sleep while appearing to look at his console. He knew every vending machine's contents and optimal times to visit for fresh stock. Lenny Leonard and Carl Carlson were more than co-workers. They were his best friends at work. They covered for each other's mistakes, shared gossip about management, and maintained the kind of friendship that develops between people who spend 8 hours a day in forced proximity. Their conversations ranged from profound to profoundly stupid, but they were always genuine. The relationship dynamics within the Simpson household evolved as the children grew. Bart's rebellious nature challenged Homer's authority and patience. They would clash over rules, homework, and basic behavior, but they also shared a similar sense of humor and skepticism about authority. Homer saw himself in Bart's defiance, which both frustrated and secretly pleased him. Lisa challenged Homer in different ways. Her intelligence made him feel inadequate, her vegetarianism complicated meal planning, and her saxophone practice tested his patience. But her achievements filled him with pride he couldn't always express properly. When she won science fairs or played in recitals, Homer was there, not always understanding but always supporting. Maggie's arrival was unexpected but welcomed. Homer had thought they were done having children, but when Marge announced her pregnancy, he accepted it with characteristic resilience. The third child meant stretching already tight resources even further, but Homer had learned that families find ways to make things work. The peculiar relationship between Maggie and Homer developed its own rhythm. She seemed to understand him in ways as other children didn't, responding to his moods and offering comfort through her presence. The fact that she rarely spoke didn't matter. Their communication transcended words. She would fall asleep on his belly while they watched TV, her tiny hand gripping his finger. Financial struggles were a constant in the Simpson household. There was always more month than money, always another expense that hadn't been budgeted for. Homer would juggle bills, paying whichever was most overdue while hoping the others could wait another week. Yet, somehow, they always managed. The electricity was rarely actually shut off, the house remained theirs, and food appeared on the table. Homer's approach to money was optimistic to the point of delusion. He believed that windfalls were always just around the corner, that the next lottery ticket would be the winner, that his ship would eventually come in, This optimism allowed him to face financial pressure without despair, though it also prevented him from making realistic long-term plans. The schemes continued throughout his life. He tried selling grease to rendering plants, became a truck driver, attempted to become an artist, and even briefly worked as a missionary. Each career change followed the same pattern. Initial enthusiasm, brief success or the illusion of it, spectacular failure, and return to the power plant. The nuclear plant was his constant, always taking him back despite his departures. Mr. Burns remained a mysterious figure in Homer's life, simultaneously distant and omnipresent. Homer both feared and pitied his boss, recognizing that all the money in the world hadn't brought Mr. Burns happiness. Their interactions were usually brief and one-sided, with Mr. Burns rarely remembering Homer's name despite decades of employment. Smithers, Mr. Burns' assistant, was Homer's window into the executive world. Through Smithers, Homer learned about the machinations of corporate power, though he rarely understood the implications. Smithers seemed to regard Homer with a mixture of exasperation and amusement, occasionally helping him when it didn't conflict with Mr. Burns' interests. The bowling alley was Homer's sanctuary outside of Moe's. There, he could experience competence and even excellence. His bowling team, the Pen Pals, gave him a sense of belonging and achievement that work never provided. Rolling strikes made him feel powerful in a way that pushing buttons at the plant never could. Homer's relationship with food was complex and meaningful. Food was comfort, entertainment, and sometimes his primary source of joy. He had memorized every restaurant's menu in Springfield, knew which convenience stores had the freshest donuts, and had strong opinions about proper bacon preparation. His appetite was legendary, but it came from emotional rather than physical hunger. The couch in front of the television was Homer's throne. There, he could relax completely, letting the day's stresses dissolve into mindless entertainment. He didn't watch TV so much as commune with it, finding in its glow a peace that eluded him elsewhere. The family would often gather on that couch, their shared viewing becoming bonding time even when no one spoke. Homer's relationship with his father grew more complicated as Abraham aged. The old man's stories became more rambling, his complaints more frequent, his needs greater. Homer struggled with the role reversal of caring for someone who had barely cared for him. Yet he did it, grumblingly but consistently, because that's what family did. When Abraham moved to the Springfield retirement castle, Homer felt simultaneous guilt and relief. Visits were awkward, filled with long silences and repeated stories. But Homer continued going, bringing the grandchildren when he could convince them to come. He was a better son than Abraham had been a father, though neither would ever acknowledge it. The discovery that his mother was alive shook Homer's foundation. Mona's return brought joy and anger in equal measure. She explained her reason for leaving, her life as a fugitive, her constant love for him despite the distance. Homer wanted to forgive instantly, but decades of abandonment issues don't resolve quickly. Their reunions were always temporary, always ended with her leaving again for his safety. These departures reopened wounds Homer thought had healed. Each goodbye was the original abandonment repeated, proof that people you love will leave you. Yet he never stopped hoping for her next return, never stopped scanning crowds for her face. The child who had lost his mother never fully grew up in that regard. Homer's friendships beyond Lenny, Carl, and Barney were numerous but shallow. He was friendly with most of Springfield, known by everyone but truly known by few. His emotional intimacy was reserved for family and his closest friends. Others at the public Homer. Loud, funny, crude, but ultimately harmless. The relationship with Marge's sisters, Patty and Selma, was antagonistic from the start. They saw him as unworthy of their sister, a view that decades of marriage never changed. Homer responded to their hostility with hostility of his own, though he would reluctantly help them when truly needed. They were family, even if he wished they weren't. Marge's mother, Jacqueline, was slightly more accepting but still disapproving. She had wanted more for her daughter than a nuclear safety inspector with a high school education, but she recognized that Homer loved Marge and made her happy in his own way. Their relationship was cordial if not warm, built on their shared love for Marge rather than affection for each other. Homer's interactions with Bart's friends showed his struggle to be the cool dad while maintaining authority. He wanted Milhouse, Nelson, and the others to like him, but also needed them to respect boundaries in his home. He usually failed at both goals, being neither cool nor authoritative, but the kids tolerated him as Bart's weird but ultimately harmless father. Lisa's friends were more challenging for Homer. These intelligent, articulate children made him feel inadequate. He would try to engage them in conversation, only to realize he had nothing meaningful to contribute to discussions about literature or current events. Yet they seemed to appreciate his genuine, if clumsy, attempts to connect. Maggie's world was simpler for Homer to navigate. Babies didn't judge, didn't expect wisdom, didn't notice when you didn't know the answer. He could be himself completely with Maggie, silly and loving without self-consciousness. Their relationship was pure in a way his relationships with verbal family members couldn't be. Work emergencies at the plant were regular occurrences, though Homer's definition of emergency was flexible. A real meltdown might get the same response as a vending machine running out his favorite candy. This inability to properly prioritize drove his supervisors crazy, but somehow never resulted in actual catastrophe. Homer's luck was legendary in Springfield. He would cause near disasters that resolved themselves, make mistakes that accidentally fixed problems, and stumble into success through pure chance. Some called it divine protection, others dumb luck. Homer didn't question it, simply accepting that things usually worked out for him eventually. The annual company picnics were highlights in Homer's year. Free food, games, and the chance to see Mr. Burns pretend to be human for a few hours. Homer would compete enthusiastically in every event, rarely winning but always enjoying himself. These picnics represented what work could be if it was always fun, though Homer knew that was impossible. His relationship with technology was adversarial. Computers confused him, smartphones frustrated him, and anything with more than 3 buttons was suspect. Yet he managed to function in an increasingly digital world through a combination of luck, help from Lisa, and systems that were designed to be idiot-proof. Homer's health was a minor miracle given his lifestyle. His diet should have killed him years ago. His drinking was excessive, and his exercise was non-existent. Yet he persevered, his body somehow processing donuts and Duff beer without complete failure. Regular checkups with Dr. Hibbert revealed problems that Homer would promise to address and then immediately ignore. The father-son relationship with Bart evolved as Bart grew older. The physical battles of Bart's childhood gave way to psychological warfare in his teen years. They would argue about everything: curfews, grades, girls, future plans. Yet underneath the conflict was unmistakable love. Homer saw his own wasted potential in Bart and wanted better for him, even if he couldn't articulate it properly. Lisa's activism and causes challenged Homer's comfortable worldview. She would lecture him about the environment while he drove his gas-guzzling car. She would explain animal rights while he ate bacon. He would half listen, occasionally making small changes to placate her, but never fully embracing her causes. Yet he was proud of her convictions, even when they inconvenienced him. The marriage with Marge weathered storms that would have destroyed weaker relationships. There were times when divorce seemed likely, when the accumulated frustrations and disappointments became almost unbearable. But they always found their way back to each other, remembering why they fell in love in the first place. Marge's patience with Homer was not infinite, but it was vast. She accepted his flaws while constantly hoping for improvement. She covered for his mistakes, cleaned up his messes, and provided the stability their family needed. In return, Homer loved her completely, if imperfectly, his devotion never wavering even when his attention did. Their romantic life had evolved from passionate youth to comfortable middle age. Date nights were rare, usually involving dinner at a chain restaurant followed by falling asleep during a movie, but there were moments of genuine romance. Homer bringing Marge flowers for no reason, Marge making Homer's favorite meal after a hard day. These small gestures maintained their connection. The annual Valentine's Day disasters were legendary in the Simpson household. Homer would forget until the last minute, then scramble to create something romantic from gas station flowers and expired chocolate. Marge would pretend to be surprised and delighted, knowing that his panic was its own form of love. Homer's jealousy when other men showed interest in Marge was both flattering and frustrating for her. He would become territorial and possessive, despite his own wandering eye. These episodes usually ended with Homer realizing again how lucky he was to have Marge, followed by temporary improvement in his behavior. The times when Homer was unemployed tested the family's resilience. Without the structured work, Homer would spiral into depression disguised as laziness. He would spend entire days on the couch, claiming to be thinking about job opportunities while actually watching television. Marge would eventually force him into action, her tough love the motivation he needed. Each return to the power plant felt like defeat and relief simultaneously. Homer would swear this was the last time, that he would find something better. But the plant was security in an uncertain world, and Homer valued security more than satisfaction. He was a nuclear safety inspector, and that was probably all he would ever be. The relationship with television shaped Homer's worldview more than any formal education. He learned about romance from soap operas, about conflict resolution from action movies, about humor from sitcoms. His references were all pop culture, his wisdom gleaned from fictional characters. It shouldn't have worked as a life philosophy, but somehow it did. Homer's relationship with beer was consistent and uncomplicated. Duff was his brand, loyalty unshakable despite occasional flirtations with other beers. He knew every bar in Springfield, every happy hour, every promotion. Beer was social lubricant, stress relief, and reward system all in one. The moments when Homer showed unexpected depth surprised everyone, including himself. He would occasionally make profound observations about life, usually immediately followed by something stupid that negated the wisdom. These glimpses of intelligence suggested that Homer's simplicity might be partially choice rather than pure limitation. His relationship with death was fearful but distant. He had faced mortality multiple times through various accidents and health scares, but never seemed to truly process the experiences. Death was something that happened to other people, even when evidence suggested he had been seconds from it himself. The holiday traditions in the Simpson household were sacred to Homer. Christmas meant specific decorations in specific places, certain meals prepared certain ways. Thanksgiving was football and overeating. Halloween was candy theft from the children's bags. These traditions provided structure and continuity in a chaotic life. Homer's role as safety inspector became increasingly ironic as Springfield experienced various disasters, many traceable to the nuclear plant. He would file reports absolving the plant of responsibility while knowing they were at fault. The cognitive dissonance required to maintain his job, while knowing its dangers, was impressive. The relationship between Homer and God was complicated. He believed in God when convenient, prayed when desperate, and attended church when Marge insisted. His theology was simplistic and self-serving, but genuine faith existed beneath the superficial observance. He wanted to believe in something greater than himself, even if he couldn't articulate what. Reverend Lovejoy tolerated Homer with weary patience. Homer would sleep through sermons, ask inappropriate questions during services, and treat confession like therapy. Yet he was a regular attendee and generous when the collection plate came around, making him valuable despite his disruptions. The influence of television commercials on Homer's purchasing decisions was complete. He believed every claim, wanted every product, and could recite jingles from decades past. His consumer habits were marketers' dreams, impulsive and uncritical. The family budget suffered from his susceptibility to advertising. Homer's driving was legendary in Springfield for all the wrong reasons. He had caused numerous accidents, destroyed countless mailboxes, and somehow maintained his license through it all. His car was an extension of himself, damaged or functional, ugly but reliable. He drove with confidence that exceeded his competence. The rare moments when Homer was alone with his thoughts were uncomfortable for him. Without external stimulation, he was forced to confront feelings he usually suppressed. These moments usually ended with him seeking distraction through food, television, or human company. Introspection was not his strong suit. His relationship with music was limited but passionate about what he liked. He had a handful of songs he loved completely, playing them repeatedly until everyone around was sick of them. His singing voice was terrible but enthusiastic. He believed volume could compensate for pitch, energy for accuracy. The times when Homer tried to improve himself usually followed a pattern. Initial enthusiasm would lead to excessive commitment, followed by rapid burnout and return to old habits. He would join gyms in January and abandon them by February. He would start diets on Monday and break them by Tuesday. Change was hard, and Homer's willpower was weak. But in moments of crisis, when his family was threatened, Homer found reserves of strength and courage that surprised everyone. He would face danger without hesitation, overcome his natural cowardice and selfishness to protect those he loved. These moments revealed a hero that existed beneath the lazy exterior. The relationship with Grandpa became more poignant as Abraham's health declined. The old war stories that had once annoyed Homer became precious as he realized they wouldn't be told forever. He started recording them, though he still dozed off during the tellings. The complicated love between father and son became clearer as time grew shorter. Homer's influence on Springfield was greater than he realized. His misadventures were town legend. His presence at events guaranteed something interesting would happen. He was simultaneously Springfield's fool and its everyman hero. People related to his struggles, even while laughing at his failures. The nuclear plant's various near meltdowns that Homer somehow prevented became classified incidents that even he didn't fully remember. His incompetence had saved the town through pure chance more than once. He was Springfield's accidental guardian angel, too oblivious to realize his importance. As the years passed, Homer's body showed the accumulated damage of his lifestyle. His hair was gone, his belly expanded, his joints ached. But his spirit remained remarkably unchanged. He was still the optimistic, impulsive, loving man Marge had married. Time had wore him down, but not worn him out. The relationship between Homer and Marge deepened with age. They knew each other completely, could communicate with looks, had inside jokes spanning decades. Their love had evolved from passion to companionship, but passion still sparked occasionally. They were proof that imperfect people could have perfect love. Homer's legacy to his children was complicated. He hadn't been the father he'd wanted to be, but he had been present, had loved unconditionally, had shown them that failure wasn't fatal. They carried his lessons both intentional and accidental. His influence shaped them in ways both positive and negative. Bart eventually understood that Homer's limitations weren't choices, but genuine inability. The father he had resented for not being better was doing his best with what he had. This understanding brought new closeness between them, though neither would express it directly. They communicated through actions rather than words. Lisa learned to appreciate Homer's simple wisdom that balanced her intellectualism, his ability to find joy in small things, to continue despite repeated failures, to love without conditions taught her lessons no book could provide. She remained frustrated by his limitations, but grew to love him because of them rather than despite them. Maggie, as she grew, became Homer's unexpected ally. She understood him intuitively, defended him when others criticized, and found his presence comforting in ways she couldn't explain. Their bond transcended the usual father-daughter relationship, built on silent understanding rather than verbal communication. The town of Springfield itself was shaped by Homer's presence. His adventures had changed laws, created traditions, and influenced countless decisions. He was mentioned in town meetings, referenced in local politics, and featured in tourism materials. Springfield without Homer would be unrecognizable. Moe's Tavern remained Homer's second home throughout his life. The familiar stool, the same conversations repeated endlessly, the comfort routine in a changing world. Moe aged alongside his regulars, their relationships deepening through sheer duration. The tavern was a time capsule, where Homer could always be himself. The power plant eventually modernized around Homer, technology advancing while he remained static. He learned just enough about new systems to maintain his job, relying increasingly on younger workers to handle actual technical tasks. He became a fixture, part of the plant's architecture, rather than its workforce. Mr. Burns' apparent immortality meant Homer never escaped his orbit. Their relationship evolved from pure antagonism to something more complex. Burns seemed to develop a grudging affection for Homer, though he still couldn't remember his name. Homer remained terrified, but also oddly protective of his ancient boss. The annual chili cook-off remained a highlight of Homer's year, his quest for the perfect chili pepper a recurring obsession. These events represented everything he loved: food, competition, and potential hallucinations. His chili was never the best, but his enthusiasm was unmatched. Homer's health scares became more serious with age, forcing temporary lifestyle changes that never stuck. Each brush with mortality brought resolutions that lasted days or weeks before old habits reasserted themselves. He was incapable of genuine change, but also seemingly indestructible. The friendship with Barney remained despite their divergent paths. Barney's struggles with alcoholism were a mirror Homer tried not to look into too directly. He enabled his friend's drinking while telling himself he was just being supportive. The guilt over introducing Barney to beer in high school never fully left Homer, though he rarely acknowledged it consciously. When Barney achieved sobriety, Homer felt simultaneously proud and abandoned. His drinking buddy had become his better self, leaving Homer behind in their shared dysfunction. The helicopter piloting, the community college degree, the clarity in Barney's eyes, all reminders of potential wasted. Yet Homer celebrated each of Barney's victories, however ambivalently. The backslides hurt Homer more than he admitted. Each time Barney fell off the wagon, Homer felt responsible, as if his mere presence tempted his friend back into old patterns. He would stage interventions suggested by Marge, half-hearted attempts that usually ended with both of them at Moe's. Change was hard for both of them. Homer's body became a map of his adventures, scars from various accidents, a crayon lodge in his brain that somehow improved his quality of life when removed, dental work from fights and falls. Each mark told a story, most of which he couldn't remember accurately. His body was a survivor, adapting to abuse that should have been fatal. The crayon incident revealed something profound about Homer's intelligence. With the crayon removed, his IQ jumped significantly, but so did his misery. Intelligence brought awareness of his mediocrity, understanding of what he'd missed, recognition of his wasted potential. When he chose to have the crayon reinserted, it wasn't stupidity, but wisdom, knowing that happiness mattered more than intelligence. This decision revealed Homer's core philosophy. Contentment trumps achievement. Joy beats understanding. Love matters more than success. He had glimpsed the life he could have lived and chosen his actual life instead. It was perhaps the most thoughtful decision he ever made, even if it returned him to thoughtlessness. The various jobs Homer held throughout his life each taught him something, though he rarely applied these lessons. As an astronaut, he learned about courage and the majesty of space. As a bodyguard for celebrities, he discovered the emptiness of fame. As a snowplow driver, he understood the value and fragility of friendship. Each experience added depth he couldn't articulate. His brief stint as mayor of Springfield revealed his complete unsuitability for political power, while also demonstrating his genuine care for his community. He made terrible decisions based on what seemed fun, rather than what was practical. Yet his heart was in the right place, his corruption comically innocent rather than malicious. The sanitation commissioner position showed Homer at his most idealistic and most impractical. He wanted to solve problems immediately without considering consequences or budgets. His grand plans always collapsed under the weight of reality, but the impulse to make things better was genuine. He cared about Springfield even when Springfield didn't care about him. Homer's relationship with food evolved into something approaching spiritual. Eating wasn't merely consumption but communion, transcendence through taste. The perfect donut or pork chop could transport him beyond his troubles into pure sensory joy. This ability to find bliss in simple pleasures was both his greatest strength and his most obvious weakness. The annual Thanksgiving pants unbuttoning. Tradition represented Homer's approach to life. Indulgence without apology. Pleasure without guilt, until physical reality demanded acknowledgement. Then a brief adjustment, and back to indulgence. His capacity for enjoyment was undiminished by consequences. Lisa's vegetarianism challenged Homer's worldview more than any other family conflict. Her ethical arguments against meat-eating forced him to confront uncomfortable truths about his consumption. He responded with mockery because engagement meant considering change. Yet he ultimately accepted her choices, even while rejecting them for himself. The "you don't win friends with salad" chant became family lore, capturing Homer's resistance to anything that limited his pleasure. But when Lisa truly needed support, Homer provided it, even attending a vegetarian festival that went against every one of his instincts. Love conquered preference, though preference remained strong. Homer's artistic side emerged unexpectedly throughout his life. His brief career as an outsider artist produced work that spoke to critics despite his complete lack of training or intention. His barbershop quartet achieved genuine success through raw emotion and enthusiasm that technical skill couldn't match. Creativity existed in Homer, untamed and occasional. The Beast Sharps represented Homer's potential realized briefly and spectacularly. The harmony, the crowds, the Grammy Award. He had achieved something remarkable through dedication and natural talent. But success required sustained effort that Homer couldn't maintain. The breakup was inevitable but still sad, a glimpse of what consistent application could achieve. Music remained important to Homer, even after the Beast Sharps dissolved. He would sing to himself constantly, badly but joyfully. His favorite songs were emotional touchstones, connected to specific memories and feelings. Music bypasses intellectual limitations to reach his heart directly. The relationship between Homer and Santa's little helper, the family dog, was built on mutual recognition of simple needs and simple pleasures. The dog wanted food and affection. Homer provided both freely. In return, the dog offered loyalty and non-judgmental companionship. It was possibly Homer's most successful relationship outside his marriage. Snowball 2 and subsequent cats were tolerated by Homer rather than loved. He was a dog person by nature, finding cats too independent and inscrutable. The cats seemed to sense his ambivalence, avoiding him when possible. Yet he cared for them because they mattered to Lisa, another example of love conquering personal preference. The various disasters that befell Springfield often trace back to Homer's actions or inactions. His incompetence at the power plant caused meltdowns. His schemes created hazards. His thoughtlessness triggered catastrophes. Yet Springfield always forgave him, perhaps recognizing that his harm was never intentional, his destruction never malicious. Mayor Quimby's corrupt administration benefited from Homer's distractions. When public attention focused on Homer's latest mishap, the mayor's malfeasance went unnoticed. Their relationship was mutually beneficial, though rarely direct. Homer provided cover without meaning to. Quimby exploited it without acknowledgement. The relationship with Chief Wiggum was complicated by their similar incompetence in positions of responsibility. They understood each other's limitations without judgment. When Homer needed help from the police, Wiggum provided it when convenient. When Wiggum needed a scapegoat, Homer was usually available. It was friendship of sorts, built on mutual mediocrity. Comic Book Guy represented everything Homer wasn't. Knowledgeable about niche topics, socially awkward, critical to the point of cruelty. Yet they shared a love of food and pop culture that created common ground. Homer's inability to detect mockery meant he took Comic Book Guy's insults as conversation, which somehow made them almost friends. The android's dungeon was one of Homer's regular stops, usually following Bart, but occasionally alone. He would browse merchandise he couldn't afford and didn't understand, asking questions that revealed his fundamental ignorance of geek culture. Comic Book Guy tolerated him as he tolerated all customers, with barely concealed contempt and complete economic dependence. Homer's gambling problem surfaced periodically, most dramatically during the football season. He would bet beyond his means, convinced that his hunches were insights. His losses were predictable but never seemed to teach him caution. Each season brought renewed confidence and renewed financial devastation. The casino episode revealed Homer's susceptibility to addiction when given free rein. His compulsive behavior, inability to stop despite consequences, and prioritization of gambling over family were textbook addiction symptoms. That he recovered and moved on without treatment or lasting change was more television magic than realistic portrayal of addiction. The relationship with alcohol was Homer's most consistent addiction, though he would never frame it that way. Beer was his reward, his comfort, his social lubricant, and his daily necessity. Marge's concerns were dismissed because acknowledging them meant acknowledging he had a problem. Denial was easier than change. The moments when Homer quit drinking, usually due to some ultimatum or crisis, never lasted long. Sobriety made him irritable and uncomfortable, removing his primary coping mechanism without providing a replacement. He would find excuses to drink again, and everyone around him would tacitly accept it because sober Homer was harder to live with. Yet Homer had moments of genuine self-awareness about his drinking. He knew it was excessive, knew it hurt his family, knew it limited his potential. These moments of clarity would spark brief attempts at moderation that inevitably failed. The gap between knowing better and doing better was one Homer could never bridge. His relationship with his children evolved as they matured. Bart's rebellion mellowed into something resembling understanding. They were both screw-ups in their own ways, both disappointing their families while being loved regardless. This parallel created kinship that earlier years of conflict had obscured. Lisa's journey toward young adulthood brought new challenges for Homer. Her dating life triggered his protective instincts, though he struggled to express them appropriately. Her college plans brought pride and fear. Pride in her achievements, fear of losing her to a world he couldn't access. His love manifested as awkward attempts to stay relevant in her increasingly sophisticated life. Maggie's continued silence gave Homer someone who couldn't criticize him verbally. She communicated through actions and expressions that Homer found easier to interpret than words. Their relationship remained pure, uncomplicated by the expectations and disappointments that marked his bond with his older children. She would reach for him when upset, fall asleep in his arms, and seem to prefer his company over others. This unearned devotion touched something deep in Homer. The Springfield nuclear power plant safety record was inversely proportional to Homer's tenure there. Each year brought new incidents that should have resulted in his termination, but somehow didn't. His union protection, Mr. Burns' indifference to individual employees, and sheer bureaucratic inertia kept him employed despite overwhelming evidence of his unsuitability. The union meetings were social events for Homer rather than political organizing. He would attend for the donuts, vote however Lenny and Carl voted, and occasionally make passionate speeches about issues he didn't fully understand. His union brothers tolerated him because he was reliably present and consistently harmless. Homer's political views were inconsistent and poorly informed, shaped more by personal grievances than ideology. He would support candidates who promised him things, oppose those who criticized him, and forget about politics entirely between elections. His vote was truly up for grabs because he had no core principles beyond self-interest. The brief period when Homer ran for office revealed both his fundamental decency and complete unsuitability for leadership. He made promises he couldn't keep, proposed solutions that wouldn't work, and treated serious issues as jokes. Yet voters responded to his authenticity, his obvious humanity beneath the incompetence. When Homer lost elections or was removed from positions of authority, he felt relief more than disappointment. Leadership required sustained effort and difficult decisions. He was much happier following orders, even when he ignored them, than giving them. The trash collection controversy that made Homer briefly famous demonstrated his ability to identify real problems, even when his solutions were terrible. Springfield did have sanitation issues. His answer of simply taking more garbage without considering where it would go was classically Homer, addressing the immediate concern while creating larger future problems. The various threats to Springfield that Homer inadvertently caused and occasionally resolved created a strange relationship between the town and its most chaotic citizen. He was simultaneously their greatest liability and an unlikely hero. People knew his name for both the worst and best reasons. Lisa's saxophone playing filled the house with music that Homer claimed to hate but secretly appreciated. He would complain about the noise while unconsciously tapping his foot to the rhythm. Her talent intimidated him, representing abilities he could never develop, but also made him proud in ways he couldn't articulate. The jazz concerts Lisa performed that required Homer to sit still and quiet, both challenging for him. He would fidget through performances, not understanding the music, but recognizing his daughter's skill. His applause was always the loudest, compensating for his lack of sophisticated appreciation with pure enthusiasm. Homer's attempts to bond with Lisa over her interests usually failed comfortably. He couldn't grasp her books, didn't care about her causes, and found her intellectual friends exhausting. But he tried, and Lisa appreciated the effort even when the execution was lacking. His love was clumsy but constant. The moments when Lisa needed her father rather than a parent were precious to Homer. When she faced bullying, heartbreak, or disappointment, his simple comfort mattered more than Marge's wise advice. He could just be present, offering hugs and ice cream without trying to fix everything. These moments reminded both of them why they loved each other. Bart's pranks on Homer were a constant in their relationship. The boy had inherited his father's mischievous streak, but applied it with more intelligence and planning. Homer fell for the same tricks repeatedly, his gullibility and short memory making him an ideal victim. Yet he never stayed angry long, recognizing himself in Bart's rebellion. The strangling incidents that marked their conflicts were disturbing evidence of Homer's inability to manage his temper. These violent outbursts, played for comedy, revealed the darker aspects of his parenting. That Bart seemed to take them in stride didn't excuse them, though both seemed to view the violence as routine rather than abusive. Their relationship improved when channeling their energy into shared activities. Building a soapbox racer, pulling pranks on Flanders, watching action movies. These bonding experiences created positive memories alongside the negative. Homer was a better father when engaged in activities than when trying to provide guidance. The camping trips, when they happened, were disasters of planning, but successes of bonding. Homer would forget essential supplies, get them lost, and create small crises through incompetence. But sitting around a campfire, telling stories and roasting marshmallows, they were just a father and son enjoying each other's company. Marge's role as the family's emotional center meant she carried burdens no one else acknowledged. She managed everyone's feelings, resolved their conflicts, and maintained stability through sheer force of will. Homer relied on this without fully appreciating it, assuming Marge's competence meant she didn't need help. The times when Marge broke down, overwhelmed by the constant demands, shocked Homer into temporary improvement. He would step up, handle responsibilities, and demonstrate capability he usually kept hidden. These periods never lasted, but they proved he could do better when absolutely necessary. Homer's romantic gestures were grand and impractical, showing love through spectacular failure. He would attempt elaborate surprises that went wrong, plan dates that became disasters, and create chaos while trying to demonstrate affection. Marge learned to appreciate the intention over the execution. The marriage counseling sessions they occasionally attended showed both the depth of their problems and the strength of their commitment. Therapists would identify obvious issues that Homer would acknowledge and then ignore. But he kept going to sessions, kept trying his way, because losing Marge was unthinkable. Their sexual relationship remained active despite the years and Homer's declining physical condition. It wasn't passionate like their youth, but it was comfortable and satisfying in its familiarity. They knew each other's bodies completely, could communicate needs without words, and found pleasure in routines that worked. Homer's jealousy during Marge's artistic pursuits revealed his insecurity. When she painted, wrote, or created, she accessed a part of herself that didn't need him. He would sabotage her projects subtly, demanding attention when she was focused, creating crises that required her to stop. His fear of abandonment manifested as selfishness. Yet, when Marge genuinely needed to pursue her own interests, Homer eventually supported her, however grudgingly. Her happiness mattered to him, even when it meant less attention for himself. He grew to understand that Marge staying fulfilled meant she would stay with him. The renewal of their vows, done multiple times after various crises, became a ritual of forgiveness and fresh starts. Each ceremony acknowledged past failures while promising future improvement. Homer meant the promises when he made them, even if he couldn't sustain the change. The Simpson family home on Evergreen Terrace was more than shelter. It was a physical manifestation of their life together. Every stain had a story, every broken item a memory. Homer had attempted repairs that created more problems than they solved, leaving the house in perpetual semi-disrepair. The mortgage was a constant source of stress, payments missed and caught up in cycles as regular as seasons. Homer would get bonuses that temporarily solved financial problems, only to spend them on impulse purchases that created new ones. The bank threatening foreclosure was routine enough to lose its terror. The house had survived fires, floods, and various catastrophes that would have destroyed lesser structures. Like the family inside it, the building was resilient beyond reason, continuing to stand despite overwhelming evidence it shouldn't. It was held together by paint, prayer, and Marge's determination. Homer's garage was his domain, filled with half-finished projects and broken tools. He would retreat there when he needed solitude, surrounded by evidence of his failures, but also his ambitions. The garage represented possibility, all the things he might someday fix, build, or accomplish. The backyard barbecues were Homer's chance to shine as provider and host. He took grilling seriously, one of the few domestic tasks he claimed competence in. The smell of burning meat, the company of neighbors, the simple pleasure of cooking outdoors. These moments made Homer feel successful. Flanders' superior grill was a constant source of irritation. Everything Ned owned was better than Homer's equivalent possession, from lawn equipment to family relationships. This comparison fueled Homer's resentment, while also pushing him to occasional improvement through pure competitiveness. The block parties on Evergreen Terrace showed Springfield's community spirit and Homer's role within it. He was simultaneously the entertainment and the embarrassment, the life of the party, and the reason parties ended early. His neighbors tolerated him because he was consistent, predictable in his chaos. Dr. Hibbert's relationship with Homer was professional patience tested repeatedly. Homer ignored medical advice, skipped follow-up appointments, and treated symptoms as cures. Yet Hibbert continued caring for him, perhaps recognizing that Homer's constitution was a medical miracle that deserved study, if not celebration. The various health scares should have killed Homer multiple times over. Heart attacks, radiation exposure, food poisoning, and injuries that would hospitalize normal people. Homer survived them all through a combination of luck and inexplicable resilience. His body refused to quit despite his best efforts to destroy it. Homer's weight fluctuated wildly based on his latest diet or exercise scheme. He would lose significant pounds through extreme measures, then regain them plus extra when resuming normal habits. His clothing sizes varied enough that his closet spanned 3 decades of waist measurements. The brief period when Homer achieved physical fitness revealed what discipline could accomplish. He was capable of transformation when sufficiently motivated, his body responding to proper diet and exercise. But maintaining change required sustained effort that Homer couldn't provide once the initial motivation faded. His knees complained about stairs, his back protested unusual movements, and his stamina was limited to short bursts of energy followed by extended rest. Middle age had claimed him completely, though his spirit remained stubbornly youthful. He was an old man who refused to act his age. The relationship with Springfield's criminal element was surprisingly cordial. Fat Tony and his associates seemed to like Homer, perhaps recognizing a fellow outsider from conventional society. Homer would do small favors to the mob, usually unwittingly, and they would reciprocate with protection or opportunities. These mob connections occasionally benefited the Simpson family, providing access to services and goods that wouldn't otherwise be available. Homer didn't question the morality of accepting help from criminals, focusing instead on immediate benefits. His ethics were situational at best. The police department's corruption meant Homer's minor legal violations rarely resulted in consequences. He would drink and drive, destroy property, violate ordinances, and face no punishment beyond occasional warnings. Chief Wiggum's incompetence protected Homer as much as any intent. When Homer did face jail time, he treated it like vacation from responsibility. 3 meals prepared by others, no work obligations, and captive audience for his stories. Prison wasn't the punishment it should have been. His cellmates found him annoying but harmless, a designation that followed him everywhere. The Springfield Penitentiary's revolving door policy meant that dangerous criminals returned to society regularly, creating recurring threats. Homer would unknowingly befriend escaped convicts, harbor fugitives, or assist in crimes without realizing their nature. His obliviousness to danger was its own form of protection. Sideshow Bob's vendetta against Bart terrified Homer when he remembered to be afraid. A homicidal maniac targeting his son should have triggered protective instincts, but Homer's short attention span meant the threat felt abstract between incidents. When Bob actually appeared, Homer would panic appropriately. The various attempts on Bart's life that Homer inadvertently foiled showed his protective instincts working subconsciously. He would act on hunches he couldn't explain, interrupt Bob's plans through coincidence, and save Bart without fully understanding the danger. Paternal intuition existed beneath his conscious incompetence. Homer's relationship with fame came in waves. He would become briefly famous for various achievements or disasters, enjoy the attention, then fade back into obscurity. Each cycle followed the same pattern. Excitement, excess, scandal, relief at return to normalcy. The Grammy Award from his B. Sharp's days remained his most tangible proof of achievement. He would show it to anyone who would look, polishing it regularly and prominently displaying it. The award represented the person he could have been if he'd sustained effort and dedication. Television appearances were highlights of Homer's life, even when they depicted him negatively. Being on TV validated his existence in ways that actual accomplishments didn't. He would watch his appearances repeatedly, showing them to anyone who visited, unable to see how they portrayed him unfavorably. The catchphrases and moments that became cultural touchstones meant nothing to Homer, who was too inside them to recognize their significance. Dough was just an expression of frustration, not a contribution of language. His influence on popular culture was invisible to him. The Simpson family's unusual longevity, never aging despite years passing, was something no one acknowledged or questioned. They existed in perpetual present, lessons learned and forgotten cyclically. Homer remained forever in his late 30s/early 40s. His children always the same ages despite accumulated experiences. This timeless quality made Homer's life simultaneously meaningful and meaningless. Nothing changed permanently. Growth was temporary, and consequences rarely lasted. Yet each episode of his life mattered in the moment, creating memories and emotions that felt real despite their impermanence. The fourth wall breaks were rare, but showed Homer's awareness of his own fictional nature. These moments of metacognition suggested intelligence and awareness he normally lacked. But like everything else about Homer, consistency wasn't required. As this story approaches rest, we find Homer where he always is, on his couch, surrounded by family, beer in hand. The television glows softly. Marge sits beside him. The children occupy their familiar positions. This moment has happened thousands of times and will happen thousands more. Homer J. Simpson is a simple man in the best sense. He wants food, comfort, love, and entertainment. He has flaws that would destroy weaker families, but his family persists. His incompetence is balanced by resilience, his selfishness by capacity for genuine love, his stupidity by occasional unexpected wisdom. Continuing the journey, the deeper rhythms of Homer's life. But let's not end there. The night is still young, and there are deeper layers to Homer's existence that we have yet to explore. As you settle more comfortably into rest, we'll continue through patterns and rhythms that define every day of his life in Springfield, the sacred routines. Every morning begins the same way for Homer Simpson. The alarm clock rings at 6:47 a.m., a time chosen years ago for reasons Homer can no longer remember. He hits the snooze button exactly twice, giving himself 18 more minutes of half sleep, where dreams blend with the sounds of the waking house. Marge is already up, moving quietly through the morning preparations, letting him have these final moments of rest before the day demands his attention. When Homer finally rises, it's always reluctantly, his body protesting transition from horizontal comfort to vertical responsibility. He shuffles to the bathroom with eyes half closed, performing his morning routine on autopilot developed over decades. The shower temperature is always slightly too hot at first, then slightly too cold when Marge runs the kitchen sink downstairs. He's learned to anticipate this thermal shift, stepping back on the spray at exactly the right moment, a small victory of experience over circumstance. Breakfast is sacred to Homer in ways he could never articulate. Marge prepares it with the precision of long practice, knowing exactly how he likes his eggs. Over easy with the yolk still runny. How many strips of bacon constitute the right amount? Never fewer than 4. And how dark the toast should be, golden brown, not burned. Homer eats with single-minded focus, the newspaper propped against the orange juice carton, reading the sports section first, then the comics, while studiously ignoring world news and business pages that might trouble his peace. The children create their own chaos around him during these morning meals. Bart rushing to finish homework he should have completed the night before. Lisa practicing saxophone scales that make Homer wince despite his pride in her talent. Maggie in her high chair creating abstract art with breakfast foods while sucking her pacifier. Homer exists in his own bubble during breakfast, acknowledging his family with grunts and the occasional pass the syrup, content in his role as the silent center around which morning chaos orbits. The drive to work takes exactly 17 minutes when traffic cooperates, which it rarely does. Homer knows every shortcut in Springfield, though he seldom uses them because habit and routine keep him locked into the same familiar path. He listens to the morning radio shows, singing along badly to songs he knows, and complaining loudly about songs he doesn't recognize or like. Other drivers have learned to recognize his pink sedan and give it wide berth, having witnessed or heard about Homer's sporadic attention to the actual mechanics of driving. The power plant parking lot is half full when Homer arrives each morning, his usual spot in the third row waiting for him like an old friend. He's not early, but he's not late either, existing in that comfortable middle ground of acceptability that has defined much of his working life. He finishes his drive-through coffee while sitting in the parked car, delaying the moment when work officially begins by just a few more precious minutes. These 5 minutes of sitting alone, engine off, radio playing softly, are a daily meditation he doesn't recognize as such, a moment transition between home self and work self. The workplace dance. Clocking in is a ritual that Homer has performed thousands upon thousands of times. The time card slides into machine with a satisfying mechanical chunk, the stamp marking the official start of his daily obligation. He makes his way to Sector 7G, greeting Lenny and Carl with variations on the same jokes they've exchanged for years. Freshness and originality aren't required in friendships this old and comfortable. The morning safety meeting is always scheduled for 8:30 a.m., is always boring beyond description, and always features the same people saying essentially the same things they said yesterday and will say again tomorrow. Homer has perfected the art of appearing fully engaged and attentive while his mind wanders to thoughts of lunch, upcoming bowling tournaments, what might be on television that evening, or sometimes to nothing at all. He nods at what seem like appropriate moments, makes non-committal sound of agreement when prompted, and volunteers for absolutely nothing. The control panels in Sector 7G are familiar enough to Homer that he could probably operate them blindfolded, which in some sense he essentially does. The various lights, switches, dials, and digital readouts have become extensions of his consciousness after all these years. He knows through experience which alarms signal genuine emergencies and which can be safely ignored, which readings indicate actual problems requiring attention, and which are simply the plant's normal operational quirks manifesting themselves. Coffee breaks happen at 10:15 a.m. and 2:30 p.m. every single day without fail, these times unofficial but rigidly observed by everyone in Sector 7G. The break room serves as Springfield Nuclear Power Plant's true social center, the place where gossip flows more freely than the terrible coffee from the perpetually stained pot. Homer learns about his co-workers' lives in these precious 15-minute intervals. The divorces and marriages, the births and deaths, the minor triumphs and crushing disappointments that make up the texture of normal human existence. He contributes his own stories to this ongoing narrative, usually exaggerated for maximum entertainment value, always received with the appropriate responses from an audience that knows him well. Lunch arrives at noon exactly, as regular and predictable as sunrise. Homer eats in the cafeteria when Marge has packed him something special, which happens most days because she understands that her husband's happiness is often directly proportional to the quality of his midday meal. Her sandwiches are architectural marvels of carefully balanced flavors and textures, nutritious ingredients carefully disguised among the things Homer actually wants to eat. When there's no packed lunch waiting in his bag, he visits Krusty Burger or one of Springfield's other quick-service establishments, ordering the exact same meals he always orders, finding comfort in this predictability. The afternoon at work stretches considerably longer than the morning ever does. Homer's energy flags noticeably after lunch. His attention wanders even more than usual. His eyelids grow heavy with the weight of digestion and boredom. He takes an unofficial nap most days around 2 p.m., strategically positioned behind his console, where supervisors are unlikely to notice, trusting Lenny and Carl to wake him if anything genuinely important happens. They usually remember to do so, though their definition of important is nearly as flexible and situation-dependent as Homer's own. The final hour of each workday is invariably the longest. Homer watches the clock with the intensity of a man timing an Olympic sprint, willing the minute hand to move faster through sheer force of concentration, counting down the remaining minutes until blessed freedom. He tidies his workspace in the most superficial way possible, files reports that should have been completed and filed much earlier in the day or week, and prepares for tomorrow by doing as little as humanly possible while still maintaining plausible deniability. When 5 p.m. finally arrives, and it always does eventually, though it never feels that way, Homer is invariably the first person out the door, his departure so swift and practiced that it appears choreographed. The evening return. The drive home reverses the morning's journey geographically, but Homer's mood and energy are entirely transformed. Work is behind him. Home and family await ahead, and the evening stretches before him like a gift. He stops at the Quickie Mart perhaps twice a week on average, picking up beer or snacks or whatever item Marge specifically asked him to remember that he's already forgotten despite her writing it down. Apu greets him with warm familiarity, their relationship built solidly on thousands of small transactions accumulated over the years. The arrival home is announced by familiar sounds. The garage door opener's mechanical rumble, the car pulling into its designated space, the engine shutting off with a rattling sigh. Homer sits for a long moment in the sudden silence that follows, transitioning mentally from work mode to home mode, from employee to husband and father. Sometimes he falls asleep right there in the driver's seat, waking minutes or even hours later confused and disoriented about where he is and how long he's been sitting there. The evening routine varies far more than the morning's rigid structure ever does. Sometimes there's a genuine crisis requiring his immediate attention, some problem with the children's homework or behavior, some household disaster needing repair, some emergency that only a parent can address. More often, though, there's just a comfortable, predictable mundanity of family life proceeding at its own pace. Dinner happens around 6:30 p.m. when circumstances allow. The entire family gathered around the kitchen table in a ritual that feels increasingly old-fashioned in modern America, but remains fundamentally important to Marge, and therefore to all of them. Homer approaches dinner with the same focus and intensity he brings to breakfast, though now he's expected to actually participate in family conversation, rather than existing in splendid isolation behind the newspaper. He shares carefully edited versions of his workday, strategically leaving out the extended naps and embarrassing mistakes, while emphasizing the few genuine moments of competence or humor. He listens to his children's stories and complaints with partial attention, enough to nod appropriately and grunt acknowledgement, but not quite enough to remember specific details when questioned about them later. After dinner concludes, Homer migrates to the living room couch with the inevitability of a salmon returning to its spawning grounds. The remote control fits his hand with the perfection of long familiarity, worn smooth and comfortable by thousands of hours of continuous use. He flips through available channels with practice efficiency born of deep experience, eventually settling on whatever programming requires the absolute minimum of mental effort or emotional investment. Sometimes it's sports, sometimes syndicated reruns of shows he's seen dozens of times before, sometimes the evening news that he'll watch but not retain, the information flowing past his consciousness without leaving any lasting impression. Marge joins him on the couch when her own evening responsibilities and chores are finally complete, settling into her customary spot beside him like a piece completing a familiar puzzle. They watch television together in that particular species of comfortable silence that only long-married couples truly understand, occasionally commenting on what they're seeing, but mostly just sharing physical and emotional space. This quiet companionship, this simple act of existing side by side without constant need for interaction or conversation, forms the true foundation of their marriage. More important and more sustaining than grand romantic gestures or passionate declarations could ever be. The children orbit the living room throughout the evening, pursuing their own individual interests while still being pulled into the family's gravitational center. Bart might sprawl on the floor working on some elaborate scheme or prank. Lisa might practice her saxophone in the adjacent room, where the sound carries but doesn't dominate. Maggie might toddle around the space, creating her own private entertainment that only she fully understands. Homer sits there like the sun they all revolve around, largely unaware of his own centrality to their solar system, content simply to exist in their presence. Bedtime for the children is theoretically set at 9 p.m., but in practice it rarely happens before 9:30 or even later, depending on the evening's events and everyone's energy levels. Homer occasionally participates in the bedtime routine when reminded or guilted into it, reading picture books to Maggie in voices he invents on the spot, or checking in on Bart and Lisa to make sure they're actually preparing for sleep, rather than continuing whatever activities occupied their evening. More often, though, he remains planted on the couch, letting Marge handle the complex logistics of getting 3 children washed, teeth brushed, pajama-clad, and actually horizontal in their beds. He feels mild guilt about this delegation of responsibility, but not quite enough guilt to actually change his behavior. When Marge finally returns to join him for the evening's final hours, they might talk about the day's events in more detail, make tentative plans for tomorrow that may or may not actually happen, discuss problems that need addressing, or simply continue existing together in the television's comforting glow. Homer might doze off during this time, his snoring starting softly, then building to impressive volume, only waking when Marge gently nudges him and suggests they actually go to bed rather than spending the entire night on the couch. The bedroom is dark and quiet when they finally ascend the stairs, a refuge from the day's accumulated chaos and demands. Homer performs his minimal nighttime routine with the efficiency of extreme fatigue, brushing his teeth in a perfunctory manner that will horrify any dentist, changing into sleepwear that's become more holes than actual fabric over the years, perhaps visiting the bathroom one final time. He climbs into bed on his designated side, the mattress dipping noticeably under his weight, his body settling into the impression it has gradually created in the mattress over countless nights. Sleep comes quickly and completely for Homer. He doesn't lie awake worrying about tomorrow's obligations or regretting today's mistakes. His mind shuts down almost immediately upon horizontal positioning, dropping him into deep unconsciousness punctuated by vivid dreams that he'll forget entirely by morning. His snoring is loud enough to disturb Marge's sleep, a fact she's mentioned countless times, but she's learned over the years to either sleep through it or occasionally elbow him to roll onto his side, which reduces the volume temporarily before it inevitably builds again. The weekend variations. Saturdays begin later and far more lazily than weekdays ever could. There's no alarm clock's harsh demand, no rush to get dressed and out the door, no rigid schedule imposing structure on the morning hours. Homer sleeps until his body wakes naturally, which usually happens around 9 a.m., emerging slowly from the bedroom to find the house already bustling with particular energy that Saturday mornings possess. Weekend breakfast is typically more elaborate than weekday fare, with pancakes or waffles or French toast replacing the efficient simplicity of eggs and toast, and Homer approaches this meal with gratitude and appreciation, eating slowly and savoring both the food itself and the absence of any schedule demanding his attention. The weekend chores that Marge assigns are approached by Homer with impressive creativity in avoidance techniques. He might enthusiastically start one of the requested tasks, only to get distracted by something else, and end up doing something entirely different from what was originally asked. Fixing the loose front steps somehow leads to reorganizing the garage, which leads to discovering old belongings that trigger nostalgic reminiscing, which leads to spending 2 hours looking through old photo albums instead of actually accomplishing any productive work. Marge has learned over many years to dramatically lower her expectations for Saturday productivity where Homer is concerned. Weekend afternoons often involve activities with the family or desperate escapes to pursue personal interests. Homer might watch sports on television for hours on end, attend some community event or festival with Marge and the children, or end up at Moe's Tavern claiming he'll only stay for one quick beer. That single beer invariably becomes several, hours passing in comfortable male companionship as Homer and his friends solve the world's problems in theory while affecting absolutely nothing in practice. These tavern sessions serve as crucial decompression time, allowing Homer to be just himself rather than employee, husband, or father. Sometimes the weekends bring completely unexpected adventures that disrupt whatever plans might have existed. A simple trip to the grocery store becomes an encounter with old friends or new enemies. A planned, relaxing day at home explodes into some crisis, requiring Homer's direct intervention. These unplanned adventures break the routine either pleasantly or unpleasantly depending on their nature, but they always become memorable in ways that ordinary weekends never quite manage. Sunday carries a subtle but definite weight that Saturday doesn't possess. The awareness that tomorrow means returning to work, that freedom is temporary, that Monday looms inevitably ahead. Church attendance happens most Sundays when Marge insists firmly enough, which is a majority of weeks. Homer sits in the pew wearing his ill-fitting suit that only emerges for church and funerals, standing and sitting on cue like a well-trained but uninterested participant, singing hymns enthusiastically but completely off-key, and sleeping through Reverend Lovejoy's sermons with the impressive skill of keeping his eyes technically open. Sunday dinner is often the entire week's best and most elaborate meal, as Marge pulls out recipes and techniques she doesn't have time or energy for during busy weekdays. The family gathers more formally around a table, sometimes including extended family members or close friends. Homer presides over these gatherings with a sort of patriarchal authority that he doesn't really possess or deserve, telling familiar stories that have been heard many times before and making jokes that everyone knows are coming but still manage to generate polite laughter. Sunday evening brings the weekend's inevitable end and Monday's approaching reality. Homer grows noticeably quieter as the night progresses, his enjoyment of remaining relaxation time tinged with increasing awareness that it's temporary and dwindling. He goes to bed Sunday night with genuine reluctance, knowing that the alarm clock will ring tomorrow morning and the whole exhausting cycle will begin again, as it always has and apparently always will. The seasonal cycles. Each season brings its own distinctive patterns and rhythms to Homer's life, transforming his routines in subtle but significant ways. Spring arrives with allergies that make Homer genuinely miserable for weeks, his eyes constantly watering and his nose perpetually running, complaining constantly about his suffering while simultaneously refusing to take medication consistently enough for it to actually help. The warming weather means yard work that Homer avoids with impressive determination until the grass grows embarrassingly tall and neighbors start making pointed comments, at which point he attacks the overgrown lawn with brief manic energy, before inevitably giving up halfway through the job. Spring also signals a return of baseball season, and Homer follows the Springfield Isotopes with passionate but wildly inconsistent attention. He claims deep and sophisticated knowledge of the sport, while frequently demonstrating that he understands neither its fundamental rules nor its strategic complexities. Attending actual games at Duff Stadium means consuming overpriced beer and hot dogs with pure joy, the game's outcome feeling almost secondary to the total experience of being there in the crowd. Summer transforms Homer's daily routine more dramatically than any other season. The oppressive heat makes him noticeably more lethargic than usual, constantly seeking air-conditioned spaces and cold beverages to make life tolerable. He dreams persistently about pool ownership, calculating costs he absolutely cannot afford, and imagining parties he would never actually host even if he did somehow acquire a pool. The actual summer reality involves running through lawn sprinklers like a child and trips to the overcrowded public pool, where Homer inevitably gets severely sunburned despite Marge's persistent nagging about applying sunscreen. The 4th of July stands as Homer's single favorite holiday of the entire year, combining pyrotechnic spectacle, excessive food consumption, and uncomplicated patriotism in ways that speak directly to his soul. He purchases illegal fireworks from highly questionable sources, sets them off with dangerous enthusiasm and minimal safety precautions, and considers the celebration genuinely successful only if nobody actually requires hospitalization. The minor burns and frighteningly close calls never teach him appropriate caution for the following year's celebration. Summer evenings last notably longer than other seasons, giving Homer additional daylight hours to waste in ways both productive and utterly pointless. He might barbecue dinner on the backyard grill, sit on the front porch drinking beer and watching neighbors, or chase the ice cream truck alongside his children with embarrassing enthusiasm. These long, warm evenings feel almost limitless while they're happening, time moving differently in the golden light that precedes sunset. Fall brings cooler temperatures that Homer genuinely welcomes after summer's oppressive heat and humidity. The return of football season provides rigid structure to his autumn weekends, with games scheduled with the regularity and reliability of religious services. He watches with Barney when possible or alone when necessary, shouting advice and criticism to television as if the players and coaches could somehow hear him, celebrating victories with disproportionate joy and mourning defeats with equally exaggerated despair. Halloween transforms the entire Simpson household into controlled chaos that Homer secretly loves. He adores candy even more than his children do, and the holiday provides perfect excuse to consume it without guilt or restraint. He claims quality control responsibility over the children's collected haul, confiscating his favorite pieces while leaving them with whatever remains. His own trick-or-treating days are long past, but he relives them vicariously through Bart, Lisa, and Maggie's adventures. Thanksgiving represents everything Homer loves concentrated into a single day: family tradition, cultural ritual, and most importantly, truly excessive amounts of food. The turkey is never quite big enough in his considered opinion, though Marge's preparation is invariably perfect regardless of the bird size. He eats until genuine physical discomfort forces him to stop, then somehow finds room to eat more anyway despite his body's protests. The post-meal nap is deeper and more satisfying than any sleep except actual nighttime rest. A food coma, so profound it borders on medical condition. Winter brings Christmas, the holiday that reveals Homer's surprisingly sentimental core beneath his usual crude exterior. Despite the financial stress it inevitably creates and the shopping anxiety that builds throughout December, Homer genuinely wants to make Christmas absolutely perfect for his family. He hangs outdoor lights that constitute obvious fire hazards, buys gifts the family budget cannot realistically accommodate, and becomes unexpectedly emotional about traditions and rituals. His Christmas spirit is completely genuine even when his execution is characteristically flawed. The cold weather means spending more time indoors, which suits Homer's preferences perfectly. He cranks up the thermostat despite the mounting heating bills, wraps himself in blankets like a cocoon, and treats the entire winter as an extended hibernation season. Snow means reluctantly shoving the driveway while complaining bitterly, occasionally building snowmen with the children when guilt or genuine affection motivates him, and tracking wet slush through the house constantly despite Marge's increasingly frustrated protests. New Year's he typically finds Homer at Moe's Tavern with his usual companions, drinking heavily and making ambitious resolutions that he'll abandon with impressive speed by January 2nd or 3rd. The countdown to midnight feels genuinely momentous in the actual moment. Everyone's celebrating the fresh start and new possibilities that a new year supposedly represents. Homer begins each new year with touching optimism that maybe this time will be different. Maybe this year he'll finally make meaningful changes, though he never actually does. The emotional patterns. Homer's relationship with Marge follows its own cyclical patterns of closeness and distance that repeat throughout their marriage with predictable regularity. They experience good weeks where everything flows smoothly and naturally, where they laugh together easily and genuinely appreciate each other's presence, where the partnership feels effortless and exactly right. These harmonious periods arrive without deliberate effort or planning, representing natural alignment of mood, circumstance, and mutual goodwill. Then inevitably come the difficult weeks, when every interaction feels somehow loaded with unspoken tension, when Homer seemingly cannot do anything right no matter how hard he tries, when Marge's normally vast patience wears dangerously thin. Homer doesn't always understand what caused the shift from harmony to discord, responding to Marge's coldness with confusion and hurt feelings that he can't adequately express. These difficult periods usually pass eventually, but while they last, they color his entire mood and make home feel less like the sanctuary it should be. The fights between them follow depressingly predictable patterns after all these years together. They typically start with something objectively small and manageable. Homer forgetting to run an important errand, Marge criticizing his parenting decisions, some minor transgression that shouldn't matter much. But the small irritation expands rapidly into much bigger issues, old and supposedly resolved grievances resurfacing like zombies, voices rising in volume and intensity. Homer says things he immediately regrets. Marge speaks painful truths that hurt precisely because they're accurate. Then comes silence, cold and heavy, stretching for hours or even days depending on severity. The reconciliations are rarely dramatic or cinematic in nature. More often, they simply resume speaking to each other gradually, the fight fading into shared history, without any formal resolution or apology. Homer might buy flowers as a peace offering, or make some other conciliatory gesture. Marge might cook his favorite meal as her way of signaling forgiveness. They circle back toward each other incrementally, rebuilding normalcy brick by brick until the foundation feels solid again and they can pretend the fight never happened. Their intimate physical life ebbs and flows in rhythm with these emotional patterns. The good weeks bring natural physical closeness, desire rekindled by emotional connection and genuine affection. The difficult periods leave them sleeping on opposite sides of bed, carefully avoiding accidental touch, as if contact might trigger another argument. Homer wants more consistency in this aspect of their marriage, but has no idea how to create it or maintain it. With his children, Homer experiences entirely different cyclical patterns. Bart cycles through distinct phases of defiance and cooperation, sometimes functioning as Homer's buddy and ally, other times positioning himself as antagonist and enemy. These transitions happen without warning or obvious cause, leaving Homer perpetually confused about where he actually stands with his son. He tries different parenting approaches in response, Strict discipline one week, friendly permissiveness the next, but neither strategy works with any consistency. Lisa's relationship with Homer cycles between active engagement and complete withdrawal. Sometimes she actively seeks his company and attention, asking questions about his life and genuinely wanting his presence. Other times she retreats entirely into her own intellectual and artistic world, apparently finding Homer irrelevant at best and embarrassing at worst. He misses her acutely during these distant periods, but has no idea how to bridge the gap she's created between them. Maggie's constancy provides Homer with crucial refuge from these unpredictable cycles with his older children. She remains consistently happy to see him, always comfortable in his presence, always willing to be his baby girl without conditions or complications. As she inevitably grows older, this too will change and become more complex. But for now, she represents unconditional love in its purest and simplest form, requiring nothing from him except his presence. The friendship rhythms. Homer's friendship with Barney has survived multiple decades of shared dysfunction and mutual enabling. They facilitate each other's worst habits while simultaneously providing essential companionship that neither could easily find elsewhere. Their time together is utterly predictable in the best possible way. The same bar stools at Moe's, essentially the same conversations on endless repeat, the same drinks consumed in the same order. This sameness is profoundly comforting rather than boring, representing a relationship that demands nothing beyond simple presence while providing everything needed. When Barney achieves sobriety, their friendship strains in unexpected ways. Sober Barney becomes uncharacteristically judgmental about behaviors he previously shared and enabled, seeing Homer's drinking clearly for the first time and feeling compelled to comment on it. Homer feels abandoned even though Barney is technically more present and reliable than ever before. The friendship eventually adapts and finds new footing, but the old ease and comfort are gone, replaced by something more complicated. Lenny and Carl represent a distinctly different category of friendship, workplace relationships bound primarily by shared circumstance rather than deep personal connection. They know Homer's work persona intimately, the simplified public version he presents during daylight hours, but they understand relatively little about his private life or inner thoughts. Outside work, they still gather occasionally for bowling or poker or watching big games, but the friendship feels qualitatively different without the power plant providing context and structure. The three of them maintain certain traditions religiously, bowling every Thursday night when possible, monthly poker games rotating between homes, Super Bowl parties that have happened annually for so long nobody remembers when they started. These recurring events mark time's passage in reliable ways, annual rituals that confirm continuity and stability in relationships that might otherwise drift apart. Ned Flanders remains Homer's single most complicated relationship outside his immediate family. The resentment and jealousy never fully disappear, always lurking beneath whatever surface friendliness exists at any given moment. Yet genuine affection exists there too, born from years of forced proximity as neighbors and countless interactions ranging from terrible to wonderful. They've helped each other through legitimate crises, shared confidences during vulnerable moments, and created bonds that persist despite their fundamental differences. Homer has borrowed Ned's tools countless times and never returned them, damaged Ned's property repeatedly through carelessness and incompetence, and shown up uninvited at all hours expecting assistance or company. Ned has forgiven every single transgression with Christian charity, so profound and consistent, actually makes Homer feel simultaneously grateful and resentful. This endless cycle of transgression followed by forgiveness defines their relationship more than any other single factor. When Ned faced genuine tragedy and loss, Homer rose to the occasion in genuinely surprising ways. He organized community support networks, stepped in to help with practical matters and daily responsibilities, and showed up consistently when it truly mattered most. These moments prove conclusively that beneath their surface antagonism lives real friendship, currently dormant perhaps, but fundamentally durable. Moe occupies a unique and somewhat ambiguous space in Homer's life, functioning as part friend and part service provider. Their relationship is fundamentally transactional at its core. Homer buys beer, Moe sells it, money changes hands. But years of nearly daily proximity have created genuine connection that transcends simple commerce. Moe knows Homer's moods intimately, can anticipate his orders before they're spoken, and provides informal therapy along with alcohol. The tavern itself functions almost as a character in Homer's life rather than merely a setting. Its dim lighting and familiar smells feel more like home than home sometimes does. The wooden bar worn smooth by countless thousands of elbows, the cracked vinyl covering the bar stools, the television perpetually showing sports. These physical elements create an environment where Homer can be completely himself without pretense or performance. Sleep now, knowing that Springfield will still be there tomorrow, that Homer will continue causing chaos while finding joy, that the Simpsons will endure whatever comes their way. Their story continues endlessly, always familiar, always home. Rest easy with the knowledge that somewhere, Homer is happy with his simple life, surrounded by people who love him despite everything, finding contentment in beer and donuts and television. That's enough. That's everything. Good night, Springfield. Good night, Homer. Good night to everyone and everything in this warm, comfortable world. The story goes on forever, but for now, for tonight, rest comes gently. Tomorrow is another day in Springfield, and Homer will be there, living exactly as he always has, exactly as he always will. Sweet dreams.